So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think what we're going to do is thank the press very much right now and ask folks to step out.
Are you waiting on Putin to make the first move, sir?
About the news conference, maybe going to do more? What do you think?
Stay tuned, Steve. Buckle up. Bring snacks next time.
Did he think it was long enough?
Record breaking. Many records broken. Job creation, press conference length, you know. We have been in touch at a high level with Ukrainian officials and leaders. They certainly understand from those conversations what the president meant. And you saw the president make a statement or convey clearly his point of view this morning, which is reflective of exactly what he said, most importantly to President Putin. Go ahead.
Jen, just to make it very clear, has President Biden spoken to President Zelensky since his comments yesterday?
He has not. He has spoken with him a couple of times, as you know, in the last month, but we have spoken at a very high level.
The sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Of course, and
so
I'm
we
so
are
sorry
very
to interrupt,
clear,
but
and
it is less than clear because 30 minutes after the news conference, the White House press secretary had to actually clarify the president's remarks.
Savannah, I'm being clear with you right now.
Yes, okay.
And so if you're interested, I'll continue to be clear, which is that we
just to be, let's be clear, because
yes,
there are 100,000 Russian troops amassed at the border with Ukraine, and people there are hanging on the president's every word. Was the damage done? You can't unring the bell. Is Vladimir Putin likely to listen to a later statement from the White House press secretary or the words of President Biden?
And in particular in this case,
I'm sorry.
President Biden has repeatedly said the words of a president matter. So why isn't he more careful with his remarks?
Well, I think the president gave nearly 2 hours of a press conference last night. What we conveyed last night and this morning, was exactly what he's conveyed to President Putin. And I think what's important to the American public, and tell me if you agree or disagree, is what the president's positions are and what he means. I was already planning to go on Fox News, looking forward to it, in fact.
Take the time to send out the tweets, do the media appearances. Does that
doesn't take long to send out a tweet, promise you.
Does that take away from the? But does that take away from the administration's ability to send a consistent message to international allies and the American people?
I can assure you that our allies and partners know exactly what the president's position is.
Accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually...
President Biden said the midterm elections, quote, easily could be illegitimate. Is he predetermining that the November elections are going to be suspect?
Well, I talked to the president about this last night and this morning. He was not intending to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the 2020 election. He was actually attempting to make the opposite point.
Location.
Well, to the point, though, because
so
those bills were debated. The bills were debated and they didn't pass.
If I may finish, if I may finish.
But the specific question, if you don't mind, does he think, now that these bills haven't been passed, that the 22 midterms won't be legitimate or fair or free?
And let's not be distracted by the political gamesmanship. Stay.
And the president laid a
policy, Savannah.
Yeah,
well,
For the election, you said the president's intention was not to cast doubt on the upcoming midterms. But when a reporter followed up, the president said to him, "I'm not saying it's going to be legit. The increase in the prospect of being illegitimate is in direct proportion to us not being able to get these reforms passed." So yes or no, does the president believe, if all remains as it is right now, that the elections this fall will be legitimate?
But what the point he was making is that as recently as 2020, as we know, the former president was trying to work with local officials to overturn the vote count and not have ballots counted.
If there are no changes in terms of voting rights legislation going forward, the president does still feel confident that the elections this fall will be legitimate?
Yes.
I attended the GOP House leadership press conference today on Biden's 1 year.
Oh boy. And, did they have lots of good stuff to say?
Well, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy rejected the idea that the president floated yesterday that Republicans are blocking his agenda. He said the White House has not approached them about his agenda outside of infrastructure. What's your reaction to his words that you're not working with Republicans?
Mr. McCarthy wants to come over here and have a constructive conversation about more we can do together. I don't think that's a comment he made that's entirely on the level. given we certainly have engaged with Republicans across the board. The President of the United States himself has. And so I don't think that really bears out in fact.
Well, to his point, though, Democrats, however, proceeded with Build Back Better through budget reconciliation. They approached it with the intent that they would need only Democrats to get that agenda done. Again, for this question, looking at chunks, what's the bipartisan plan moving forward?
Well, look, in the history of reconciliation and the use of it, it's been bipartisan about 20 times. And maybe somebody asked Mr. McCarthy this or not, are Republicans now against negotiating lower prescription drug prices? Are they now against lowering the cost of childcare? Are they now against lowering the cost?
The president put a lot of blame yesterday on Republicans for failure to get some of these key initiatives passed. But these initiatives failed because Democrats weren't united, let alone Republicans. Was that an error as you look back on this year?
Bipartisan infrastructure law. Have tried for years.
Well, doesn't that show Republicans were willing to help if the initiatives were good?
But they.
But did any of you think that you get to a point where not a single Republican would diverge on a major issue?
Yesterday, the president blamed Republicans for blocking his agenda, called them obstructionists, but he admitted that he hadn't reached out to any on the issue of voting rights. So now, given where things stand with these two bills, will he be reaching out to any Republicans?
But I will also say that there has been discussions between Democrats and Republicans for months now about voting rights legislation. They are not uninformed about exactly what this legislation would do, and they've always been welcome to be a part of the conversation. They decided not to.
Talked about the importance of him getting out of Washington and explaining his agenda. How often should we expect to see him out and about America?
What that looks like on the schedule, we're still determining that, but it certainly means you'll see him out on the road more. So we don't have anything more to preview, but I think you heard very clearly multiple times last night from the president that that is how he wants to spend more of his time moving.
Was the implication of this, that statement didn't quite say it, that when the president used the words minor incursions, he had the paramilitary actions and the cyber attacks in mind?
Yeah.
So.
And he should, and later on he said cyber attacks, right? But not in the first answer.
So are we to conclude from that then that paramilitary action and cyber attacks would not necessarily trigger the full sanctions or get unanimity within NATO to do that? Because that was the context of his minor incursions.
I think we have a range of the point he was making is that we have a range of tools, right? I'm not going to outline for you here, what if this, what if that.
For 5 or 6 years, even back to when you were in the Obama administration, you may recall there's been an effort to try to bolster particularly cyber deterrence by not making a distinction between what you could do with the cyber attack and what you could do with a physical attack. And obviously the Russians have turned off the power in Ukraine twice, in 2015, 2016. They messed with an election in Ukraine before they came here. So I'm just trying to figure out if the president's trying to make a distinction that we would use lesser forms of penalties for cyber attacks or paramilitary action than we would for going over the border. In other words, are we diminishing what over the years two or three administrations have tried to build up in that sphere?
Our intention is not to diminish. Our intention is to be very clear about what a military incursion would mean.
That the administration is being moved too far to the left, and that could present challenges down the road for you.
The president's view and our view is that his agenda is one that is broadly popular in the country among many progressives, but also among many moderates and, frankly, many Republicans.
If you take all the foreign policy elements that happened, the pullout of Afghanistan, the Iran talks, Russia, the AUKUS deal, and the crisis with France, how would you assess that first year when it comes to foreign policy?
rebuilding our partnerships and alliances around the world. They are worried about how long, and that is how frayed the last president left those relationships. But he did. One, we have a long and abiding relationship with the French. They've said that, so I don't think it's accurate to say it was a crisis. Two, he still stands by his decision to end a failed 20-year war in Afghanistan. I don't remember what your third one was, but